Good day all. Good afternoon. You're watching Makoga Enterprises. The video you just watched right now and you're still watching, which is on the screen, it's a fire. So we'll be discussing on what actually can cause that type of fire. So actually we'll start with understanding what is fire. So we'll start by knowing what is fire, which is very important. So what is fire? Fire is a chemical reaction which gives birth to heat and light. It's a chemical reaction that gives birth to heat and light. So after understanding what is fire, now we start understanding the composition of fire. What are the different aspects or the different things that should come together so that we have that chain reaction that will give birth to fire. Now we start talking of the fire triangle. So we need to understand what is a fire triangle. So the fire triangle, we've got three different elements or components. When they come together, they will produce that fire or give birth to fire. We'll be talking of the fuel, heat, as well as oxygen. So we'll start with the fuel. So when we talk of fuel, we are talking of three different types of fuels. We'll be talking of either liquid, solid, or gas. So any of them that we have, it can as well produce or give birth to fire. So we'll move to the other point or the other element, which is oxygen. So when we talk of oxygen, we are talking of 20.9% of oxygen level that we have at the atmosphere. So this is the oxygen level at which we are also breathing, and which is also sufficient enough to ignite or give birth to fire once we have all these different elements together. And then the last, we'll be talking of heat. So we require come together, then produce or have that chemical reaction that will produce fire. Let's look at now the fire. So the fire that we are watching right now, it's an electrical fire. It is being caused by having maybe some kind of electrical hazards or things that we carry out on our electrical installation works, which does not conform to requirement as well as it's not of quality. So things as such can give birth to fire. So we'll now start looking at the different things that can arise or the different things that can produce that electrical fire. So we'll start by looking at hazards of electrical energy. So I'll first of all define what is hazard. Hazard is anything that have the potential to cause harm. Anything that have the potential to cause harm. So we now start looking at different hazards which are involved in electrical energy. So we'll be talking of short circuit as well as overload. So when we talk of short circuit, we're talking of having two different conductors or different polarities, bringing them together. This will result to short circuit. And when we have the short circuit, what happens in our circuit will we have an increase of current, which is not the required amount of current that should be running in that circuit. So as such, it becomes now an abnormal condition in our circuit. So it gives rise to increase of current. And when we have increase in current, it as well increases the temperature of that particular circuit. So we'll move now over to overloading a circuit. So when we overload a circuit, we are adding more load in the circuit where that circuit is not designed to carry. So as such, when we add more load, it will pull more current as well from the source coming to the load. So our cables as well were being designed and selected to carry an amount of current. So when we start loading or adding load in our circuit, it will pull more current from the source, which that cable is not more able to carry. This now will produce more heat that will damage that cable and then give birth to fire. All right, so we've understood now these two different hazards that I mentioned. We talked of the short circuit as well as overloading a circuit that will increase the amount of current in our circuit, which the circuit is not designed to carry and will not be able to carry that much amount of current. So when we have an increase in current, like I said, it will as well increase the temperature of that particular circuit. Like we all know, when we look at the circuit or the cables that we are selecting for our different circuit, it could either be a cable or a wire. So we might be talking of either PVC cables or an armor cable, or XLPE cable. So they all have their different temperature or the maximum temperature at which they can carry. So we might be talking of either 70 degrees C or 70 degrees Celsius, as well as 90 degrees Celsius. These are all the different temperatures at which either XLPE or PVC cables can carry. So once we exceed this amount of temperature, now this cable will not be able to carry that. As such, when we have this huge increase in temperature in our circuit, now we already have the good amount of oxygen, which is 20.9% in the atmosphere, as well as we have the fuel. So when we start talking of fuel, in this case, we are talking of solid fuel. Now we'll be talking of either our cables, wires, as well as panel boards that we have, or maybe electric motors. So when we have all these are all the different fuels. So we also have the oxygen, like I mentioned. Now, once we have sufficient amount of temperature or heat, it's now combining together now to form the chemical reaction or the chain reaction, which will give birth to fire. And the reason why I'm coming up with this topic is for us to be able to understand the different composition of fire, or the different composition of electrical fire, and what really give birth to this electrical fire. It can happen either in a residential building, a commercial building, as well as industrial facilities. So as such, it might damage our properties, as well as having to do something with our health, which is something which we are praying not to happen. So let's look at now the different ways at which we can break this fire. So we have the best fire extinguisher, which is used for electrical fire, which is carbon dioxide, or CO2. Again, we can use dry chemical powder, which is an option, but it's not the best option to use. So the best option to use, always go in for carbon dioxide or CO2 fire extinguishers. So to break this fire, there are things that we have to do or take into consideration. So after looking at the fire triangle, so we have the fuel, we have heat, as well as we have oxygen. So if we take one of them out of these elements, what happens is it's going to end up that fire. There will be no fire any longer. So if we take up the fuel, which are the cables or the panel boards, if we take them away, there will be no fire. The same way, if we take oxygen away, there will be no fire. Or if we take away the heat, there will be no fire. So let's look at the different ways at which we can do that. So we'll start with the first one, which is cooling method. So if we use a cooling technique, we are taking away heat out of that fire. So by taking heat away, we now call it the cooling technique, or the cooling method. Now let's move to the other technique, which is known as the starving method. So to starve, we are taking away fuel. We ensure that we don't have fuel again in our fire. So as such, there will be no fire again. So again, we can as well take away oxygen. So to take away oxygen, there will be no fire as well. So that is known as smothering. So we use the smoothing technique to eliminate oxygen from that fire, so that we will not have fire any longer. So these are the techniques, or the different components, or the ways at which we can break the fire so that we don't have fire any longer. Till then, you're watching Makoga Enterprises.